like I
Black
said.
Box Radio. Good evening. It's a rainy day in Baltimore City, and we are in a bbR pop-up series. And let me tell you, it's gonna be hot tonight. We got a great conversation coming. I'm just so excited, but I'm gonna first introduce myself. I'm Queen from Black Box Radio, and we are a media platform for Black excellence. We platform Black genius. We put Black people on platforms, forms, and we disseminate information to the Black community. But more than anything, we humanize ourselves to other communities who do not understand the Black experience. So it needs to come from us, about us. So that's what we do here. So tonight, we are in the BBR pop up series. Let me tell you about that. That is a series that we do when we just cannot hold, we can't wait till next month. We usually book and we just need to talk about something. And so the community of Baltimore is so important. Baltimore is so important. And so the communities that are in Baltimore are important because they are the engine that run everything. So we need our communities and we need Baltimore to be healthy for our communities. So tonight I invited amazing guests, and he wrote this amazing compilation. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So Ray Kelly, say hi to the people. Welcome to the box.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me, Queen. And let's talk about it. I mean,
Let's talk
this
about it.
this is the topic right now where I'm glad it was timely. I'll say with everything that's going on right now.
Well, yep, there's a lot going on in Baltimore City, and community is what we are, and that's what we're going to talk about. Baltimore. So first, I want you to tell the people a little about CPP, yourself, and the things you've done in Baltimore City, and then we're going to jump right into this report.
Okay, so I'm Ray Kelly. I'm currently the executive director of the Citizens Policing Project, which is a resident public safety advocacy group. We focus on police reform and ensuring a community voice is leveraged in new police policies, making sure the consent decree gets done. I was formerly the CEO of the No Boundaries Coalition. I've served in 100 capacities, it seems like, for the city. I've chaired the CODIF. I've been on the transition team. I'm currently on the local control advisory board. I was the lead community liaison for the consent decree monitoring team for 2.5 years. So I'm a longtime advocate from Sandtown, and I've been fighting for a lot of years to leverage community voice into all the processes that's tearing our city down.
Yep, that's Ray Kelly. And listen, you have an amazing resume, but you decided to write something, or actually, kind of, it sounds like a call to the community and a call to also organizations in Baltimore that listen, we want different for Baltimore.
So, just to give background on the report, so following the protests in 2020, following the George Floyd murder, we at CPP, we had what we called working in the front lines with the police reform efforts and getting the consent decree done. So we just kind of came up with a list of commitments we wanted for the city. And from that protest birthed, not our protest, but from that time of protest birthed that whole defund the police movement. And for us, that's always what we said. So our initial training is based in asset based community development. So we've always advocated to invest into the assets already in the community that navigate these issues to build your community. So as that defund kind of became the national call, we were funded by OSI just to kind of get the local reaction to what it was and just figure out what people want from the defund me movement and just get a community feel for public safety in our community. So that grew into a broader 2 year grant to do this research. We worked with Equity Matters to create what we call the sense making tool, where for us, we practice intentional listening. So the meat that we want to hear is in the stories. We ain't really pressed about the numbers and the data points and all that foolishness. We want to hear the whys straight from the people. So Equity Matters worked with us and they created this tool where we kind of give a prompting public safety, like, do you feel safe in your community, or what do you think public safety means to you, or whatever prompt. We were led by our youth, so whatever prompt they choose, we had like a list of 8, and they were able to tell their story. Could record it, video, audio. If they wanted, they could type it in, and we accompanied that with a bunch of listening sessions that we were having. We still have every month, and I see Antoine jumped on. He was at a couple of those as well, where we just kept posing that question to different groups of people in different parts of the city to see how the residents, not us activists and not the politicians, but how the people in those impacted communities feel about this whole Black Lives Matter, defund the police, abolish the police, however they wanted to take it. And I don't know, it's not what a lot of funders and a lot of foundations want to hear, but it's the truth. And I think that's the key to it all. So that's what was the foundation of this report. So this report is the first. We'll put out another one at the first of next year that kind of outline methodologies and initiatives that work, and talk to those people to see how we can scale their projects up bigger instead of keep going out of town and finding somebody with a robot model, and kind of lift them up in the report and actually present with our next report not just viable community based solutions, but also a framework for their financial feasibility and what it would take, and so on and so forth. So that's what prompted the report. So this is kind of the first year, 2021, what we actually heard. So I think our last meeting was like January the 5th, and then Omicron hit. So we sat down, and that's when we kind of assessed the data that we had thus far. We talked to over 1,000 people. We
Okay.
got we
Well,
had
let me ask a question. Let me ask a question. So you said you had a census model. So it was
uh,
something that you could. It was computerized.
right. It's a sense, we call it a sense making tool, and I can go and grab
Yeah, because that's
the
a.
link to it if you guys want. But we were intentional with it. There was a reason why it wasn't put out there public, because once it's on the internet, anybody can chime in and add their 2 cents. So we wanted to make sure, once again, that the West Baltimore community voice, and wherever we went, those impacted communities, we wanted to make sure we were hearing their voice and we were offering it directly to these people. We wanted to hear from the residents. We didn't want a big social media response. So we had like 100, I want to say 9 people engaged with the sense making tool, and 69 people actually told their story. So of all those people, 69 of them had something to say. And then that's the piece that we lift up in the report, really. So we did have data points and geography and age and all that thing to collect with these, but
Yeah.
that's what Equity Matters does, and that's what that sense making tool is for. My role was to elevate the themes and the consistencies that I was hearing from the people as I went through that year.
Okay, got it. So and that came from the sense making too. That's
Hmm.
amazing. All right, so we're gonna bring in Antoine. Antoine, listen. This is he's my co-host for Community Corner, but this is the pop up. But it's he had to be in this conversation. And so Antoine, introduce yourself, and we're gonna jump right back into the report.
What up, Baltimore? It's Antoine Cross from Hope Baltimore, helping oppressed people excel. Advocate, founder, director, leading voices and community voices for oppressors in communities to educate about the barriers and stigmas that hinder formally impacted people from moving forward and sustaining themselves. Appreciated to be here with my partner, Queen from Black Box, my
Yeah.
main man, the GOAT, the GOAT, Ray Kelly, CPP, Opportunity Avenue, and today a lot is going to be told about things that's being done that people see done and at the results happening around Baltimore.
That's it. We are here to talk about the long game. And the first, the, when I looked at it, Ray, the first thing that I saw the name of it, and it says Defund, Divest, Reform, and Abolish. I said, "Oh my goodness, that's 4 points right there for you." That's you
And
know
that's
that,
the law. So
huh?
that was the law. So it didn't the report doesn't really say that that's what we should do, but that's what the conversation starters were. So like there's an immediate reaction when you hear certain words.
Yes, it is.
That was the purpose of that becoming part of the title because that's where we hear it. Those are even though we all look for the same thing, that's four different avenues right there, and people take their approaches seriously.
Yes, and those are serious, and those are revolting. So I love them. I was like, wow, you ready to do some real work out here.
Well,
So
that's what people talking about. Let's hear what our people got to say about that for a second.
yeah, so let's put it on. It's like it had talked about the police, it talked about nonprofits. It's just so much to talk about. My goodness.
So I
Um, Police first. We gotta talk about.
so I think what we hear constantly as we've been out listening, as the data says, people don't see a change with the police. Even the people that are engaged, that are educated on the consent decree process, where I think throughout the city and all of our mechanisms, these same communities just feel like it ain't going to never work. Be it the police, be it city hall, be it whatever the case, people still don't believe that there's been any change. And if you look at the news and the media, for real, it doesn't look like there's been any change. And that becomes the straw that breaks our backs, where people just don't feel like it's worth their energy to keep pushing for somebody to represent them properly when we 40 years into just corruption and scandal, and the police are the same, where the police essentially still do their own thing. They're accountable to no one. So they got like this consent decree, and people just feel like it's over 5 years and we don't see change. And I'm a big proponent of a consent decree to ensure our civil rights, but I don't feel like the court, the police department, or the city is acting with the urgency as if their civil rights were violated and their human rights were stomped upon. So, because that's not their lived experience, it's okay to drag it along and let it take forever. Where for people that have been dealing with police corruption, misconduct, abuse of power, whatever the case may be, for decades, they want something to happen now. And like I said, we had that momentum when we got the consent decree and the Obama administration was adamant on reform, and Trump came in and put the kibosh on everything, and people don't feel like we've actually started moving since.
Wow. That's hard to hear. And
Okay.
so a consent decree now is hurting the city
No, it doesn't hurt the city. It's like
because
it's just there. It's costing the city, and I think the consent decree now is being leveraged beyond its intent with this whole public safety piece, where we never had a consent decree because the violence was up and murders were high. We had a consent decree because the police department was corrupt and they were mistreating people. And
Mhm.
mm,
the consent decree is there to make sure that people are treated humanely and constitutionally. And it has nothing to do with consent decree. But now you have the mayor and you have the commissioner and saying if we get the consent decree done, you're going to be safe. Where if you get the consent decree done, we might have a better police department, and then we can start the work of actually making the community safe. But the consent decree ain't going to make us safe. The consent decree is going to make the police stop abusing their powers.
wow. Yeah,
You know,
we're in a tough place. Go ahead, Juan.
Ray, you think back, man, from like us growing up in West Baltimore, and years of abusive police and targeting communities, and now like labels have come to the float of the water: criminalization of poverty, carceral citizenship, high crime areas, and a lot of times I think like people had so much misinterpretation about what the consent decree supposed to do,
Yeah.
and the reason why like you first form a community consent decree or community decree to give a voice to hold people, to hold them accountable for their actions when they come in, and homeowners and things of this nature have residentially left areas that all their life they lived and struggled and wanted to be in because they was feared they wasn't being looked after by those people who swore to protect and serve, and then looking at crime levels landing on people's front doors, police with no knock warrants and running in houses, in this house, that house, this house, calling nuisance houses because a family has 5 or 10 nephews, cousins, and all that living in that one house because of an employment crisis. That the traffic made it like a nuisance house, and now they was targeting addresses to just do raids on ridiculously.
And I think that's the key is one, the people that were educated on the consent decree kind of fell off of the process when Trump came in and the DOJ kind of backed off of Baltimore. And then, secondly, like you said, people kind of hear the rumors about what a consent decree is and what a consent decree is doing. When the consent decree came out, and still today, you have officers that would say, well, it's because of the consent decree we can't do this, that, or the other, when the consent decree don't change no laws. The consent decree just tell you how you do your job constitutionally. So you've always been battling the different narratives, and unless you are right there, you don't really know the ins and outs. And I'll be honest, the city didn't really invest in educating our residents on what the consent decree was, what was supposed to happen. A lot of that fell on us in the advocacy work.
So, and I think that's a way of not really holding us being able to hold them accountable. When you don't understand it and you just hear what it is, then holding someone accountable is pretty hard.
Right. And
So I don't think the
so
city wanted to represent it anyway.
right, I feel the same way. And there are things because of lack of education where we had whole organizations rallying around stopping the chokehold when George Floyd was killed, but in actuality, that was banned with the consent decree. You can't do that here, and that doesn't happen here. So I think the focus, for one, should be on implementing the consent decree. So I'll be all over the country doing this police work and civilian oversight work, where a lot of cities feel like Baltimore has the blueprint for
Really?
police reform. Yeah, we do.
You
But
did.
we don't have the will to put it in place.
Yeah.
It's sitting right
Really?
down there at the federal court. There is no
Mhm.
more radical reform document than Baltimore's consent decree. It's just sitting there. We've drafted all the trainings. It's all there. It's just not being implemented on the street. It hasn't been through the whole system of actually doing the stuff that the consent decree says do.
So how are they able to do that then? How
Well,
is it?
it's overseen by the courts. So if there's a process. I'll make sure I'm educating people. I'm just not putting one perspective out there. So there was a process of the first piece was to draft new policies. The second piece was to draft new trainings. The third piece was to implement the trainings on those new policies. And then the next piece should be, notice I say should because this ain't happened yet, is actually realizing your training and your education on the street. And that's where we lacking at here in Baltimore is actual street level change. We've changed a lot of policies. If you look
Mhm.
at us on paper, we look real good. But
Okay.
still we're in the same situation
Which,
that we're in.
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So they've changed policy, but they haven't done any direct training of police on the street, and so that's why we see
Oh,
the same.
they've done a lot of training in the classrooms and e-trainings and e-learnings, but so there's some kind of morphed, I'll call it, police procedural policy that says until every officer is trained on a new policy, then that policy can't be deployed, as they call it, into action. So for real, you could have
Wow.
20 assholes that just say, I ain't going to take it. And that'll drag it on forever. I don't know if that's the case, but that's a possibility. Where
There's
for
no
some reason,
date. There's no date, no
well,
requirement.
that process coupled with a pandemic, we've afforded the police department every possible accommodation in this process. And even though in a logical mind is understandable, our community still haven't seen the changes we were promised 6 years ago. So it's
Yeah,
time for somebody to do something.
that's it. And we have a lot of layers that you talked about in your report. The police is definitely one. You talked about
Schools.
nonprofits. I mean,
The schools is the biggest thing.
schools.
So I feel like I wanted in my report the calculations say 1 out of 10 people, but it depended on where we were. Where in Sandtown,
Hmm.
I'll say 3 out of 100 people didn't point out the failure of our education system in our communities, where that's so multi-layered, where people, and you see it in the report, we talk to people in their 70s as well as teenagers, and almost everybody we talk to says the failures in the education, the school to prison pipeline is real. In
Mhm.
certain communities where, like Twan said, it's poverty is criminalized in those communities. So really, if you struggling and you in that community, you penalized, even if you're not
Mm.
criminally charged. You
Yes.
penalized, and the
You
kids are
can.
penalized through the schools. The
Mhm.
schools suffer the
Wow.
same blight as the community that surrounds it. So
Mhm.
that's why you see the numbers are low where the crime numbers are high, because crime, blight, grime, all that stuff goes together. And like you say, when you
Mm.
criminalize poverty, you sentence our children to a subpar education.
But then,
Wow.
Ray, like you always say, that's an outlook to show youth that this is the only thing that you can become.
Right.
We gonna stipulate it and make it that way that you become hopeless to give up. Because one of the things that I always look at is the amount of areas of educations schools that between elementary and high schools that are in crime affected areas and been subjected to reinvest and build buildings to make it like, oh, this is a 21st century school, but you haven't did anything to give a hopeful level of economy or some type of pathway of stability that they can be proud to look forward and say, oh yeah, as I grow up, I can become part of this. But the only outcry is that in school, the gun shootings, the gun blazings, you know what I'm saying, the trauma from the household, being hungry early in the morning, no programs there, no rec centers to go to. So who educates them? The thing that's most happening that they see every day, and that's the street hold, that's the chokehold of the streets, that Jim Crow.
Right. And just to piggyback on that, we have to accept as adults, and if you grew up in Baltimore, you know it's a fact that there's an influence everywhere you go. So if your kids got to walk from their school to your house, their only influence is not you in that school. It's everybody they see in between. When
Yep.
them kids is home on the weekends, that's a whole different influence that they see in all day. And I think that's where the break is in this whole systemic uh, educational complex is they feel like, for one, this is a caste society, so we doing you a favor as white people allowing y'all black butts to get educated, for one.
Hmm.
So you get what you give us. Secondly, it's like it's what's expected in that community.
Yep.
So because we have this culture of tolerance in our community because of slavery and oppression, that we kind of find a way to deal with it. And as black people do, we make a best out of bad situations because history tells us if we raise our voice too loud, it's going to be dogs and hoses or whatever that can be. So, it's kind of what we've had to endure. And then you have like those, you spend middle school trying to make it to a citywide high school in Baltimore. So in Baltimore, we got what's called citywide high schools. We got zone schools. So for me, it was like I lived on North Avenue. So if I didn't go to a citywide high school, I had to go to Douglas. So that's kind of the concept of, if you from this lower income community and you can't achieve enough in middle school to go to a citywide high school,
So we
then
throw
you
you in the zone.
then you're doomed. You're doomed to deal with what happens in this community. And when I was in high school, Twan was in high school, we had trade schools. So we did have an option in our community that kind of could save us, but that's not even. It's more science and technology now, where really it's just at the cost of the numbers, so to speak. Our communities have been shortchanged on education, I'll say.
Yeah, yeah, they have. It's so unfortunate. And so, when we talk about schools, then we sending kids out ill-equipped
Hmm.
for their future, and then we see why so much dissemination and so many issues in society or in the community is because they're not even equipped to think.
Right. So
Wow.
while we were doing this report, that's when the whole issue happened with the guy that was supposed to graduate, and they found out he was on a
Yes.
second grade reading level. And to want to tell you, we had meetings with our youth group 3 weeks in a row
Right.
because the kids was irate about it. We had to have
Yeah.
a meeting with adults so they could tell us what it meant, where they just was not accepting on that. And what we learned was we've all failed our kids. Us, because we've accepted what's been given to us. We didn't fill the gaps like we should have.
Mhm.
And the city itself, just because of intentional oppression and lack of investment. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, the kids were adamant where just as much as they felt like no one, and we had some 11th, 12th graders that felt like nobody should be in their position that didn't do the work. So they just didn't see how he could have been passed all along. But they were just as irate at the fact that his mother said she hadn't seen her son with a book in 10 years. That just like, you ain't seen your kid with a book in 10 years and you never said anything. And
Right.
this was like coming from the kids. They were like, no, this ain't the way it should be. And
Dang.
we
That's
accept
something
that.
else.
We accept that. It's quiet right now. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody said how they fixed it for the next group. It's just quiet. It's like, okay, that happened, but think of how many years we've heard about these scandals where
Yeah.
teachers changing grades so they can get funding and blah 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 and this and that, where really, even though we see it as this big scandal,
Mhm.
our kids are the ones that got penalized for all that,
Yeah.
and nothing changed. You didn't hear
Nothing
about a
changed.
change afterwards. You heard about somebody got locked up, somebody got fired, somebody had to resign.
Hmm.
System still in place. They just got a new cog in that position.
You better say it. That's the issue. So system.
Yeah,
It's systematic. People say, "Well, why is this happening?" It's built to do. This is why it's built. It's built for it to happen like this.
exactly. And I've always said that
That's what it
United
meant where they
United States is big
just would not
on
accept it.
amending laws that were founded in oppressive thinking. Never admitting that they're wrong. They never say that these laws impacted black people adversely or anything, but they'll amend them and say, okay, now it's more inclusive. But that's the gist of all the things that are recommended in this report is, even though it's not directly giving money to black people, this is our reparations. You got to your reparations as a system that intentionally oppress
Yeah.
one particular culture. Your reparations have to be, you have to repair the damage you done.
Absolutely.
You ain't got to give me 40 acres and a mule, but you damn sure got to give my kids a state of the art school. And that's the way I see it at this point. They've kind of pushed this along. They consistently tell us, pull up your bootstrings, and you got all these black celebrities that talk that craziness. They made it out. But the fact of the matter is, children shouldn't have to go through it. Why do we still have to go through that if there's now equal opportunities? That got everybody quiet.
No, Tron is saying something, but I think he's on mute.
Oh, you on mute, Twan?
It's
There you go.
crazy, like you say, like people fought for equal opportunities, and that the parents and grandparents' vision for things better for their children and grandchildren. But today, it's like the same level of struggles, you know what I'm saying, to survive. And then the discernment about, I gotta take care of me, so how I supposed to take care of you, you know? And then system supports that's supposed to help is penalizing parents in order to like be together as a whole to network, and then making them either fight for the household stability, or penalize you for the economy and make y'all enemies, and then the child gets scarred in the middle. You know,
Right,
you know, youngins, you know, Ray, many as times like many youngins that like we have helped or like gave uh, uh money to have food and things of this nature, and like, bro, I ain't got nowhere to go. You know what I'm saying? Because like I'm doing this to squeegee windows so I can have money to like help my mom so we can be all right for the night, you know. But then when grants and millions of dollars must say, oh, we're gonna do this for the squeegee kids and da 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 da, but then we talk to them and they like, bro, they try to bring us down there and then made us promises, but then wanted us to work and then put us on a $50 to $100 a week stipend. You know, like we need money now, you know what I'm saying? Just like they need money now, you know. We got issues, we got people, families, you know what I'm saying? Some of them got kids or children, you know what I'm saying? So like this whole embetterment is a big web with a deadly spider just laying at a widow lay to
right.
venomize and paralyze people and to keep them stuck.
I agree, and I think we heard that a lot while we were out canvassing. Is just the
Right.
fact that that this system is quick to kind of use your face to kind of elevate an initiative, but they are known to not be sustainable. They kind of they use you. They kind of bring you in the front, or they start some initiative and they put this investment up front and parade it in front of cameras and all of that, and then it's gone like a year later and it's quiet. And like I said, we kind of tolerate it.
Yep.
Like we allow those people then what actually happens, and it's in the report, it's just worded differently. What happens when they allow that to happen, that's when they selling their souls to the devil. That's when they actually making this agreement or alignment with some politician or some funder to kind of create this program. All of them get all the publicity of it all.
Mhm.
And even though that program didn't do what it said it would do,
Yes.
it got that recognition and that funding in the beginning. And Baltimore, like everywhere else, is money is the root of all evil. And you saw it, the nonprofit complex here is terrible. And
We want
most
to talk about it. I want to talk about it. It's a lot of nonprofits in Baltimore. This is the seat of nonprofits. It is. It is.
so
180 of them.
I think it's more than that now.
Yeah, it might be more. Yeah, I think it's more than that because, you
I
know.
think it's more than that. But I think that's an issue. Is here we have a lot of quote unquote resource and service providing organizations, but yet just like the police, just like the schools, we still in the same damn situation. So what's going on? Where are these results that you guys are getting millions of dollars for? We according to the last study, it's referred to, I think it's 2018, where Baltimore had over 10,000 people with chemical addiction,
Mm-hmm.
where that's 10% of our population.
Nation, 10%. Yeah.
Or something. It was something like that. It was 10% of our population, so it
Nation.
might have been 50,000 people with chemical addiction.
That's
But
that's horrible.
right, but still, we invest for one. We invest 1 penny into the combined drug and mental health treatment for every dollar we invest in law enforcement. So that's one imbalance right there, where that
A
dynamic,
dollar and a penny.
right?
Wow.
That dynamic ain't going to never change as long as it's like that.
Yeah.
But we have that 1%, which is not a little bit of money, going to organizations that are like doing this. And I get it. It's a fentanyl opioid epidemic. Believe me, I'm come from a world of addiction, and I know what it's like, and I get the hardships and all that. So we ain't even gonna go there. But it's a lot of groups that are, I'll say, claiming that they're treating all these people and getting the addicts off the street and getting these people jobs and doing this, that, and the other. And damn it, I go on Pennsylvania Avenue 7 days a week.
Right.
And it's the same damn thing. And I try.
Same thing.
We do Opportunity Avenue every week. We do about 15, 20 expungements. We refer people to resources. People come through all the time to get food and household and hygiene stuff from our office. That's all great. But I'm talking about CPP small. We got a staff of 3 and a group of kids that we give a stipend to. So we small. We do what we can for them. I'm talking about these $1 million organization nonprofits getting funded with these city contracts, and we still in the same situation
Yeah.
where what the hell is going on? What are we investing in? And I think that's a lot of people's problem is, right, people, the commonality in no matter what people feel is their priority. That's the kind of beauty of reporting on the stories, not on the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
because people have, every individual has a individual priority because of their experience, and everyone has a different purview on a certain circumstance because of their experience.
Okay.
And I think that's key to what these little small things that we talk about, where I mean, this report ain't really saying nothing new when we say the city has to make a commitment to education in the black community. But I think when you put that story behind it and kind of
Yeah.
add the why to this
Exactly.
report, that's why I had to tell one of those newspapers about this report, where you got to understand in the community, it's not about those numbers, because 9 out of 10 people don't want to give a formalized statement. They don't want to record. They don't want to give their names. And I had to explain to her that that's the story of why shit is the way it is. Why these people are telling you why. They'll give you 5 minutes of why they don't want to participate in your 2 minute survey
Mm-hmm.
easily, because they just don't trust anything that engages this system.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. So they'll spend more time not wanting to do it than to just do it.
Well, I think that's why we have to come up with this concept of
Wow.
intentional listening. That's why we have our little circle conversations, because what we know is historically people in our communities don't feel like they've been heard. So when you give them the opportunity, you don't got to have survey questions there. If you let people say what they have to say, they will answer all of those questions that you got in your survey for you. And if you let them finish, They will even give you solutions
Since
that they think will work
work.
to
Yep.
Wow.
solve that.
Yep.
But because our community gets shut down so many times by the public, the politicians, or don't have access to leverage their experience and their voice,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. So that's why we know we've learned, like Twan said, when we did the People's Decree, I did all that interviews by paper. I had a little recorder. We had the transcribe where this is like modern technology brought to this. And that
Mhm.
kind of brings it all to light where people are just
Wow.
tired of the fight for the same thing
Mm.
generation after generation
Generation.
after
Yeah.
generation. And
Yes.
for some reason, it's always the perpetuation of the same old status quo.
Yep. Same
Well, I
people.
think that has to be directed. It's not, you don't
Oh,
just
yeah.
get this way. There has to be something intentional about that effort.
Well, in this report, I don't only call out nonprofits and politicians and the police, but us. It's up to us to actually change this. So, really, all the things we talk about and the residents identified in our report
Mhm.
are because we've kind of disengaged ourselves from the process and we've just kind of accepted that this stuff is jacked up and we just got to figure out how we navigate this as a community, when in actuality we are housed with the biggest weapon black people have ever owned here in Baltimore City, because when they redlined us in these dense communities, they never imagined that every Marylander over the age of 18 could vote. Now, just imagine if
Yeah.
we could harness the eligible vote that really want to see change in their community from
Wow.
every district,
Mm-hmm.
elevated our candidates and voted. I mean, I don't think any city council district won by more than 1,000 votes. I could be wrong. We had a couple unopposed, but I don't think many of them won by more than 1,000 votes. Where
Wow.
we could actually
Wow.
change the dynamic of our communities
Mm-hmm.
at the next election.
Introduction.
Just if we spend the next year or two focused on education, voter registration, vetting the proper candidates and elevating them, Democratic, Republic, whatever we want it to be, independent, but just focused on
Community.
elevating and preparing people to serve us in
Wow.
our community,
Communities.
we
Yep.
could kill them. We got the see. Baltimore
Wow.
has this thing. We black people are the majority of the citizens,
Mhm.
but we're not the majority of the voters.
Voters.
Mm.
If we flip that dynamic where every eligible voter voted,
Mm-hmm.
we
Wow.
will own this city. We
Yeah.
need to do that. We need to get. We got embedded politics in Baltimore City. We got legacy politics, family members. We got
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
people vote for a name for somebody that died 12 years ago,
Go.
just
Yeah.
because that's what they're familiar with. And if you pay attention, look in
Okay.
our communities, you don't see no campaign signs and stuff like that around. They don't care if we vote or not.
Yeah.
We ain't nothing to the numbers. If we
Yeah.
vote, we the wild card.
Exactly. We don't.
Right,
They don't want us voting. Yeah.
right. They don't even want us to be educated on the process. A lot of people we talked to during our canvas that had criminal records were like, I can't vote. I got a felony. And I'm like, nah, bruh, that
Yeah.
law to change.
Change. Yeah.
As
That law
long as you
change.
ain't been convicted of voter fraud, you can
Yeah.
vote in Maryland.
You can vote in Maryland.
And if we could educate and register all and then turn them out at the polls, which is the most
Yes.
important piece, is to actually turn them out, we could
Yes.
flip this city. This city is ran by like two Democratic clubs. So nobody is held accountable because they all friends and buddies, and They bring in all their friends to get all the contracts and the top level jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
they give the grants to the nonprofits ran by their friends. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's so warped up. You got people
Yeah.
getting a full time salary from the city, a full time salary from a nonprofit,
Profit.
and own a business that's open during daylight hours
And
every day.
around that it serves.
Right. And
What?
it's like,
Yeah,
right. I mean, yeah.
yeah.
How was we ever expecting things to change when this is how we're operating? And this is how we've been operating. This ain't brand new.
So
This
you
is
could just
kind of,
work do 4 different things and get salaries.
yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you
That's
plugged in. If you in the in crowd,
yeah.
if you
Wow.
know people.
There's some real stuff going down. So
Yeah.
my
That's why,
God.
like we always say, we gotta stay safe because we only get one shot. And
Yeah.
at times, all of us can't go together because alliance, they can't know all of us who's playing a part,
Hmm.
you know. But when introducing one and saying like the relationship being built, like you need to see exactly what we're doing. And like Ray say, like since January,
Excuse me.
this the fourth month. Every month, Opportunity Avenue has serviced over 40, 50 something people, right? Out of that 40, 50 something people, 16 of them got legal work where expungements got done, warrant recalls, eviction lien lifts, services, treatment, and all that, you know. But yet, when we look around, when people get thousands and do reports and say, oh, we service 2,500 people in the community. In 1 year and we don't see no actual results, but we serve people for 29 weeks straight during a pandemic and kept them healthy. You know what I'm saying? Made sure that they had masks and connections to healthcare to get COVID testers and things of this nature and where to go that was safe.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But like also being, I remember people was trying to come and drop food off and say, oh, can we be here and pop out with their cameras and oh, we got this, we here at the triangle with da 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 da, and we've been doing this like whoa, whoa, whoa. You come from where that food come from. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like we got bags that we bagged, we got it Thursday, we refrigerated Friday, Saturday morning we bagged it up, now it's in their hands. Where stuff was coming out of boxes, and we was like, this gonna draw the rodency. So now we great deal with another issue of pollution, trash, and rodents. But yet they ain't gotta be here, you know. So like, and it was a funny episode that happened when we had took a break to shut down. That somebody went to a district person and they charged them and said, look, you can go there, great numbers come there, you can do this and do that. And when we finally figured out to come back out to do the community back to school event, the lady was like, we never seen this amount of people at one time, and we've been here for weeks. But I got charged and da 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 da, and I said the scams that get ran on our people for being
Yeah.
in places.
And I think that's key. That's what it's always been about. Where we keep hearing about those great works, and I know for a fact great work gets done in some of these silos. But when we're still seeing the same numbers and the schools are still addressing the same issues,
Yeah.
you got to question some of these choices made by our
Yeah.
elected officials and what y'all doing with our money. And I think that's key. And the best we've been able to get is that constant campaign rhetoric of, well, in my term as blah blah blah, this is what I want to do. Where we know this can't be undone in 4 years. This can't be undone in 8 years. This
Really?
in the long game. I suggest that
It's the long game.
we
Yeah.
start with a 12-year investment,
Wow.
intentional investment in the schools, and then treatment facilities
Yes.
and not even focus on any of the outcomes for the 12 years. Just focus on education, getting people in, actually turning out productive citizens. And
Mm-hmm.
then we measure where those kids that started kindergarten at the beginning of this investment, see how many of those kids go to college at the end of those 12 years.
Yep.
So that's the way we gauge it, where you can't say, I'm looking to do this, I'm looking to do that. You got to think of the fact that even if I lose, I want this to be a legacy type project where in the end, my community still benefits.
Yep.
That's the biggest problem is people with self-serving interest kind
Mm-hmm.
of lose who's actually supposed to benefit.
You know what? I like that. There has to be a lengthy rehab almost
Hmm.
for the city, and we're saying 12 years. I like that because we need time to. It's not going to happen in 4. You're right.
Right,
It's not going to happen in 8.
Hey,
So,
right. Well,
so
and that's the key is we doing this
hmm
for the next generation. In my brain, and I'm no academic, but in my brain, an educational generation is
yeah,
12 years. Our children have 12 years of public school to prepare themselves to be productive members of society. So let's be intentional about how we invest, make equitable investments, not equal investments,
hmm
because we got a city and the school system and the school superintendent that feels like we to blame for our situation where
absolutely.
they see equal investment where if they get $10 million and they got 10 jurisdictions, they invest $1 million in every jurisdiction. So
yep.
that's an equal investment, but that's not an equitable investment
Investment.
because if you got a school
Yep.
that's in the 50 percentile and you got a school that's in the 85 percentile, this school down here in the 50 percentile needs more
Yep.
than the school that's already up in the 85 percentile. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to intentionally invest in those lower scoring institutions. And then we also need to have committed funds to actually make it happen. It can't be done with supplemental funding, it can't be done with a grant. This city has to commit to changing the trajectory of the education system.
Just,
And like I said, it's got to go beyond any one candidate's tenure, and they got to be able to live with that.
Okay, it has to be a commitment for the city across
Hmm.
the board. Whoever comes in, keep implementing
Right.
this system.
Well, it's got to be. I mean, there's a way you can draft a charter, whatever you got to do with saying that we're going to invest this. You can be as specific as you want into these schools or these communities to bring them up. You can have your intentions. You can write all that stuff in the city charter. You
Exactly.
just got to be brave enough to commit to do it when you got other influencers that feels like we need to focus more on Harbor Place. We need to focus more on generating some tourists for this city. We need to get some big industry in there where
Yeah.
none of that's worth a dime if you got no workforce to
force.
populate
Right,
it.
right. To help it.
So unless you investing in job readiness, workforce development,
Yeah.
and creating access to opportunities, you just talking to the other half. And we hear what you're saying and you talking out your ass to us.
Yeah. But I think they even think they're bringing their own people.
Well, that's a big problem the city has is
Yeah, they're
they
bringing their
feel
own.
like everybody knows better than somebody in Baltimore.
No, right.
They never look to the
Yeah.
people that effectively navigate, survive, and
Yeah.
if Twan don't like Twan said, we did before we started Opportunity Avenue, we were out there in those in the triangle 29 consecutive Saturdays where we went around, we got the food, we bought the excess, we bought bags because we in a transient community. People can't carry a
Mhm.
30-pound box of produce around all afternoon. We started adding peanut butter and jelly and bread, snacks, and oodles and noodles and stuff like that to the groceries because that's more conducive of the community that we lived in. But
Exactly.
but like he said, the stuff that we did, we never put out flyers. If we did posters or flyers, we did them in the immediate community because
Oh, okay.
we had too much need already where we didn't need to import any need. Like Twan said about those big organizations, people talk about they only did 15 expungements last month or whatever the case,
Wow.
but we did every month. And for real, the people we help come back and help us
And
and
bring others.
they bring other people where we a
Mhm.
sustained presence. We don't do events. We have a couple events a year, back to school bash or the coats and the clinics thing, but we always try to incorporate some sort of service for our community because we in a
Mm-hmm.
community of need. People need stuff in our community. So
That's so true.
Well,
That's,
people don't see that small things like Hope do a real small piece at the Opportunity Avenue, but it's like so important when you put it together with everything all of us do, where it
mhm.
may not seem like he's doing a lot, where he's just talking to people and he providing them with a bus pass, but
yeah.
the biggest barrier in
It's
our community is
it's
transportation.
transportation.
Where
Yeah.
Transportation.
I can recommend somebody go to this program, and I got a partner that do that, but
You got to get there.
if they can't get there, it ain't doing no good. Where
Yeah.
it takes the mind of this community to understand all those components. We talk a lot about training and workforce development. I myself talk about access to opportunities, but we have to make opportunities feasible. So for real, when you go to a guy that's hustling every day and you tell him that we got this program where if you do the full 6 months of this program, we're gonna guarantee you a job making $15 an hour in benefits. What this guy's hearing is, so I'm supposed to not feed my family,
Yeah.
not have no way, walk to whatever this place is at for
100,
6 months
180 days.
so I can have fifteen
$15
dollars
an
an hour.
hour. You're not gonna do
And
it.
it's like, right, who does that appeal to?
Right.
If I'm
Thank
making $200-300 every day, and that's small time, but if I'm making $300 a day,
you. Mm-hmm.
what appeal does that program have to me? You don't provide me no way to get there. You don't provide the resources for my family while I'm taking a break from the street. You
Yeah.
don't have the legal services to make sure we don't get put out.
No.
Whatever the case may be, you just got this program.
It's no
And
ancillary services because the issue I see is the crafters don't have any. They have no imagination for who they're serving,
hmm
and on top of that, they don't know how to serve.
well, I think that goes back to what you said earlier, where we import a lot of services that work well somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that get imported have no connection to the community in
That's it.
Baltimore. They don't quite understand the concept and culture of Baltimore. And
Yeah.
to be quite frank, they scared of Baltimore, where
No
they
Yeah.
doubt.
don't really want to engage with the people that need the services that they say they provide.
Right, right.
And
That's so true. And that's
sadly, sadly they get to go to the city and say, well, we had this problem or nobody showed up, and the city say, okay, here's some
don't
more
get
money,
more
go
money.
try it again.
Yep.
And that's a cycle of things that happen over and over, where it's easier to come to Baltimore from Harford County or Frederick County and get into a program than it is to be from Baltimore and get into a program in
Program.
Baltimore.
Exactly. Exactly.
It
Be
looked
right on
like
that
they want
same block
look
in
like they
front of
want
that
those
building
folk to come
every
to the
day.
day.
And like, I need some help and won't get none. But somebody will come from Anne Arundel County, beat on the door and say, I need some help. Come on in. Where your bags at? And that is insane. And that was my experience. That's why I stayed in the streets, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
but now today, like, even certain people around the city, when we call them, we had to find a guy that's NPA that will come down here and say if they ready that day, they can go back with him. While we got people around the corner and all that, we say like, bro, we got somebody that need it. Oh, do they do such and such? Oh, they got a dirty. We can't. They using, bro. How they not gonna have a not dirty? They using, but they ready, and that's what happened.
Right. And that's a sad state of affairs where, like Twan said, we got to go out of state to get somebody to offer treatment on demand here, where we got people that come to us almost every day and want to get into treatment or want to get off the streets, and we hear stuff all the time and they need to have insurance or we don't got no beds, where we both come from addiction where that has to happen in the moment.
Yeah.
You can't tell me I'm getting high and I'm in that moment where I'm looking for help, but you tell me call you Thursday. I
Mm-mm.
done sold that phone by Thursday. What you talk about?
Yeah.
So,
That's
I
not
mean,
gonna work.
they don't quite understand
Yeah, they don't.
that dynamic, and that's why it's easier for some white person from Charles County to get into a Baltimore rehab than the Baltimore person, because they're gonna have insurance, their parents gonna have that money. Where really we I don't know where we've gone on how we focus on drugs. Where in my experience here, a fentanyl epidemic brought the feds. Everybody was crashing down on the city. It's just it's amazing how far this fentanyl has gotten. I feel like a lot of it is just the system saying that, look, that's y'all problem. Here y'all go. We got some Narcan. Y'all take care of yourself. Where half the time somebody ODing, you can't even call 911. Or like, there's anybody around with Narcan? And it's so bad in our community that where I feel sorry if you have a blackout disorder or a heart attack because somebody gonna squirt some Narcan up your nose. I know if I see
Yep.
you, I'm gonna do it. I mean, for real, it's up to us to save each other lives. Where
Yeah.
sadly, that's the first thing we going to think if we see somebody, unless it's somebody there saying he having a heart attack. We're gonna think he OD'd, and
Right.
Yeah.
I got Narcan in my book bag. I'm definitely gonna pull it out. I'm gonna try to save you. I ain't gonna leave you there.
Yeah.
But God forbid you have a seizure or something, because I don't know.
Man. It's a lot to think about in these streets. A lot to think about. So the repair for Baltimore, um, there's a lot of issues. So your next report will talk about the repair. Am I correct?
So
Solutions.
could right? Well, it'll be viable solutions. So we'll actually be
Okay.
talking to program
Mm,
coordinators and different resource providers on how they could, one, cater their programming to address the problems more effectively. We'll kind of do financial and feasibility pieces where we'll figure out what it'll take to actually lift this indigenous Baltimore organization up
mm-hmm.
that's already doing good work, where they can do more good work, and people
Mm-hmm.
already trust them. So the next report will just kind of, I don't want to say it'll be the solution, but it'll propose investments that we think will lower crime,
Okay.
and that's the key to it all. Are
And
we? The police don't lower crimes. The
yeah.
police enforce the law
Enforce.
after it's broken.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's not really their job to kind of prevent crime. It's our job. And as you see, the city ain't going to step up and do it effectively. So we got to do everything we can. And a lot of us have been doing it, but we got to keep doing it. And for real, we got to talk about it more so we can get more people doing it. And in this whole next year, another thing that's happening in this process is I'm working with brother in Northwest Baltimore, Christopher Irvin, and we're going to kind of have these public accountability commissions where it's going to be a citywide, resident led, owned, and operated entity where we're not going to be aligning with any politicians. We're going to be ensuring that the community's priorities are met and in a timely manner. And
Okay.
we're going to create our own mechanism of accountability. And like I said earlier, the goal is to this time have the vote to back it up, where like none of these local city level candidates won by bigger margins outside of city council president or mayor. Those districts, we can
Mm-hmm.
own those districts if we
Wow.
show up. And even if it doesn't produce what we wanted to produce, we will have changed it. And we'll show them that we have the ability. And trust and believe, we got capable black people that can run this city. We right now we got a black face, but we don't have a cultural initiative from our higher ups.
So you're saying the leadership per se needs to, we need better leadership, and that would try to solve some of the problems. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying, because you're saying it's us, but then you're also saying leadership is an issue?
Well, it's both of us. I mean, it's us because we vote this leadership in for one.
Absolutely.
So we aren't doing our part to ensuring that we're represented properly, and
Mm-hmm.
then we consistently have leadership that succumb to the influence of the status quo.
Yeah. Okay.
So even like Brandon Scott ran on a defund platform. I
Oh.
mean, the year before he was elected mayor, he actually stood with activists and advocates to fight to get the police budget slashed by $28 million. Put it back his first year as mayor, but we have a lot of elected officials that ran on that Black Lives Matter, police reform, whatever the case may be, where you ain't hearing them in that arena right now because that's not what the influencers. The influencers are all about public safety because they
Yeah.
have interests. People in the hood ain't got no interest, or at least no interest that the politicians care about. So
Mm.
we don't put enough money in their pockets
Okay.
for our priorities to outweigh the downtown influencers' priorities.
Got it.
So
So
that's kind
everybody
of
jockeying for position to get to the money.
well, like I said, we've been corrupt for a lot of years. Where even though we have different black faces in leadership over the years, the operations of the city is still influenced by the same people that profit off of
Exactly.
our marketability.
Wow. So that's what's.
Trade, market, and sell. Trade, market, and sell.
But
Wow.
just imagine what would happen with that same internal local system if we had 10 city council people plugged in nowhere but community,
Hmm.
where these big names and business owners wouldn't mean a damn thing to them, where their focus would be to change the dynamic of their community and put forth good policies and whatever the case may be, where if we kind of separated our politics from these historic influences of Baltimore City, we might be in better shape. But sadly, it seems like we keep getting people that have self-serving interests where politics and celebrity in Baltimore kind of go hand in hand.
Politics and celebrity. I love that. But listen, we're an hour and 15 minutes in. I want to know particularly like what's your intention now for the long game?
Well, I think the intention now is to kind of identify, have these different resources and organizations kind of come forward to kind of lift up the work that we're doing so we can come and talk to them and their constituents about how this initiative is affecting them or helping them and kind of figure out how this that's working can be scaled up and elevated. So we want to
Okay.
connect with as many people as possible. We still gonna do our service work and opportunity avenue for the community, but in the next year in this part of the canvas, I think it's about collecting these ideas and resources and then presenting them to the people and say, what do you think about this? Which ones should we prioritize? Which ones will help the most? And kind of putting those in front of our elected officials, as well as the biggest damn push ever. I think there's already initiatives about education that needs to be where we start. We, even though we as activists and advocates talk about how we are affected in community and blah blah blah, nobody is kind of talking about how this adversely affects our whole next generation. Where
Wish.
while we're talking about all of this foolishness
Yeah.
and how we're going to attack it and who
Yeah.
we're going to hold accountable, our
Yes.
kids in school not learning nothing.
Not learning
They
nothing.
suffering. They
Mm,
suffering. So we need to make sure that we jump on that immediately.
immediately. I
Right.
love that. So education, we got to represent and vote.
We need
And
to represent. We
we
need
have to
to
do.
vote.
The police look like they need less money because they
Well,
have the same
I,
outcomes.
so the big piece of what the report calls for is an audit of everything,
Mm,
including the consent decree, all the contracts that the city have, all the organizations that get money to provide services, all the foundations that say they give money to address certain issues where we as a city need to audit everything, find out what's working, what's not
Right.
working,
Yep.
what should be scaled up, what should be
okay.
weeded out, and we need to kind of figure out where all this damn money is going and reappropriate it. So
They got
something else.
they got over 600 something million during the pandemic, bro. Nobody has explained where it went at.
Right.
15,000 people got $400 where they could have gave $1,000 3 times to everybody because it was only like 621,000 people here at that time.
I don't know where it
Unfortunate.
went.
You know what I'm saying? So like money was left over, and they Antoine, you mathematical, you da 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 da. I say, listen, you never will beat me from numbers because I come from a lifestyle where everything counted. We had to be on point and on key. So like the
And that's
numbers
what I
don't
say.
numbers don't add up.
Right. And that's a fact. Like you said, it's like so much money came here in a pandemic where nobody could actually do
Anything.
anything.
And that's something.
Right. And there's no accountability for it. Now we're getting all of this rescue money where, and I want to be fair to the city. I did put in a letter of intent. They did invite me to put in a full proposal for rescue money to kind of build on Opportunity Avenue and the youth group. But it was also Omicron was hitting as like a time frame where me with integrity felt like this can't be executed, even though I know
Wow.
I could write a grant to get this money, it can't be effectively executed. So I kind of didn't put in the second proposal. But there was a lot of money. What was it? 400 and something $1 million came in the rescue fund where,
Yeah.
I mean, we
Where's
got
this money? It's
a
a lot
murder
of
a
money.
day. We got unlimited supply of drug addicts. We got all of these issues,
Wow.
and
Homelessness.
right, we still only got trash day once a week. Is shit. At least
Yeah.
clean up. You know what I mean? You got
Yeah.
$500 million. At least pick up the trash twice a week. Then you could give people jobs and clean the city up.
And still collecting taxes.
Right. I
Wow.
don't get it. It's like, where is we going with these funds? And I keep hearing the mayor. I did hear the mayor with his state of the city address, but we gotta stop pushing a narrative that we know is a lie.
Yeah.
We can't keep getting in front of a damn TV camera and saying the police department is doing great, blah 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 blah, and we having a murder every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for a fact there's still internal turmoil within the police department, and it's at a high level where we know the culture hasn't changed, and that's something the consent decree doesn't address. Is the consent decree kind of forces the police department to change their tactics, but
Mhm.
it don't change their mind.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Racism and oppression is a culture they've learned over 150 years. We can't
Good.
that just because all of us then had a job that we hated going to every day because of what the stuff they made us do in those 8 hours. But we went because we had bills to pay. And that's the
Absolutely.
same with the police. They hate all this constitutional way they got to police and all of that stuff. But it's their job. They got to come and do it. So
Do
just because the consent decree says you have to do your job in this way doesn't mean you want to do your job in that way. And that
Yeah.
don't mean you got that implicit bias is already in your head and you have
Yep.
already established your own preconceived notions about these communities. And let's be real, we talking about changing a police department where the members, the officers, they've been on the force 20 some years, where they were trained in this whole zero tolerance era, where we
Yep.
talking about giving them more trainings, but we ain't unlearning them all the illegal stuff that
stuff
they
that they
learned
do.
in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
for real,
Yep.
they taking these trainings and stuff as just as a requirement of the job. They got to check that box. They got to make sure that they get this training, and
Mhm.
that's why I personally feel like we aren't seeing any of the new policies being deployed is because for real they don't want to say that they've started these new policies when the police officers ain't going to actually do them. So as long as they can drag them along, and as long as our city leadership say, okay, whatever the judge say, they just going to keep letting it slide. We got to remember, we paid the monitoring team $1.5 million every year to monitor the process, where ain't
Wow.
nothing really happened in the past couple of years. Where what we paying? I
Wow.
mean, don't get me wrong. I was on the monitoring team, and you are agent of the federal court, and I get it. It's necessary in the process. I get it. But as the process moved beyond the investigation
Yeah.
and the signing of the consent decree, who now represents the people? The monitoring team represents the court.
Wow.
DPD represents themselves,
So
Mhm.
and
who
the city,
represents the people?
People. So
right?
who represent the people?
DOJ brought the case before the court on behalf of the people, but as you see, after the case was submitted to the court, we got a Trump where the DOJ changed their politics and they weren't really involved in the reform process. So throughout this process, we've had no one
Be a
to
voice.
continually represent the people in this process. And that's why people
Wow.
are disenfranchised. They just
Wow. It's
feel
the
like it's
long
not for
game.
them. Yeah.
Listen, the long game. It's almost an hour. We could talk about this forever. This long game, we got to come back with this one. I'm telling you.
It's
Yeah.
Baltimore, man.
Come
It's the
come back
long
and get it.
game. It's
Come back and get
Baltimore.
it. Available in paperback. Go to Amazon. You
Okay.
can go to my website, cppproject.org
Mm-hmm.
/long game, and
Okay.
you can actually read the report right there in its entirety on my website. You
Okay.
can also download it in PDF right there on that page. The PDF is going to have a watermark because it's copywritten, or you can order it in ebook format or paperback copies from Amazon for $10. But as you see, very well made, put together,
Yeah.
nice bound, back cover, front cover.
Yeah. I might
It's a
have to
good
get an
read.
autographed copy of that. I might.
Well, come on by. I got you. If
Yeah.
people want to
Definitely.
come past the office, I got copies at the office for $10. I'll sign them all up.
I love
But
it.
that's what we're
You
doing. I
slinging
mean,
books. This and
well, we got to get the word out there, and people know I kind of my heart is here, my work is here,
hmm
but it's about commonality throughout this country where we got to kind of start a process of people losing that culture of intolerance, that culture of tolerance,
Yeah.
and kind of start standing up for ours. And I don't know, it breaks my heart that we don't have a stronger fight in our communities for our schools. We let them close. I mean, what other community closes schools without opening schools?
Yeah.
What community replaces the unparalleled positive visibility of an elementary school with a homeless shelter and a treatment
Yeah,
center?
yeah.
No other that would not happen anywhere else in
No
the
way.
world. But
That would be illegal.
exactly. But here they can close the school and turn it into a homeless shelter and a rehab center.
Yeah,
Really?
and make it a training center, made it a training center where they park police vans.
Right.
Really?
Right across from the dope strip where they ain't locking up nobody.
Wait.
Oh, Lord Jesus. But
Picture.
yeah, I mean, this is the only place
Wow.
I've seen that where this community is constantly losing our schools and nobody says anything. It's
Wow.
like, what they doing with these kids? Where they going now? It's like every school that closed adds 6 blocks to some kids walk to school. And y'all know how these streets are where we supposed to be we supposed to have this village mentality. I know I'm going over, but that's what this city is missing now. We used to have it when we was coming up on North Avenue, Twan. You know, every house was full. Everybody was your mother's friend. You better
Yeah,
not show out. You know, we had this
yeah.
village. We all were responsible for the kids
Like
in the
boy
house.
ain't go to school. Like we was
Right.
up Park Heights, we should cut class, we should cut out and come. We wouldn't even go round bombing because it was guaranteed from Park Heights to Ricestown, you would be seen by somebody.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
we don't
so
do that
we
no more.
went downtown, we hung out, but then like
Yeah, we don't
family
have that
started
anymore.
knowing, calling. So, where today people like, I don't care, that ain't my child. And that longevity, Shorty winds up in the bookings, Shorty wind up on somebody's t-shirt or a yard on a fence on a sheet. You know what I'm saying? Where if these schools were open and these rec centers were employable and safe with economics and stability, these kids would be safe to learn things and even media technology. It's so many developments that they'd love to be into, but they're not allowing people to bring the ideas from their point of view or perspective of what they want to do to be involved. They
Right.
shutting them down. So what else they do?
That is the end point of the BBR spotlight. Pop up. Excuse me, the bbR pop up. The long game. So Ray, you got to come back when you do your solutions. I mean, this conversation is ongoing. Baltimore, we got a lot of work to do. it would take the city to implement the 12-year, right, in the guts. So we can
The,
talk
the,
about,
the,
but they
the
would
key
have to
to
take it up.
if people didn't have so much worry and concern about their children's well-being, then we would be open and available to do other things. So read the long game because it's a lot of pieces that we have to incorporate with this educational piece, but
Mm.
it's necessary, and that's what would change the game. And my last piece that didn't make the report is I'm willing to guarantee anybody if we legalize marijuana 2 years after the implementation of it, shootings will be down 20%. I'm willing to bet anybody that just because of the prevalence of a retail establishment where half of the people that buy weed on the street is going to go buy weed from a store just because they don't want to have to walk through the strip and the wild kids and all that, so on and so forth. So, truthfully, in my mind, I believe that if we legalized marijuana, we had taxed retail establishments that sold it, it would decrease the amount of outdoor street trade. It has to be also competitive with the street prices, but it would lower that street trade, which in effect would lower violence. It's not about what they selling out there. It's just so many of them out there. Where if you kind of cut that little piece out of it, you still gonna have people that's illegally selling or the street distribution, but it won't be as much. And I promise you, that'll bring down violent shootings.
Well, I like that, but bringing down violence, and we're going to move on. You brought up a whole nother subject.
I know that's why I waited to the end to talk about it
Yeah,
because
why would you say
people
that?
didn't
But yeah,
start.
bringing down
People didn't
violence.
start talking about it till after I started writing the report. When session started, they started talking about it, so I couldn't include it in the report because the data stopped on January the 5th. But that's the conversation that's been kind of prominent while we're in Annapolis is what would the effects of legalizing marijuana be and things of that nature.
But
So
we got to think of it like, in, as Twan was saying earlier today, as you legalize it, then what about now? You haven't been successful in rehab with. You got more things to rehab. You have more other the ancillary effects. The problems in this country is when we legalize drugs, we have these ancillary effects that on a long term kill the community.
hmm
Alcohol is legalized, but long term, the health conditions and the conditions to the family that alcohol attributes to, and the implosion of the community. Long term, marijuana might stop, but then the people be addicted. The chemical disposition they're going to put on marijuana to produce it faster. But listen, you shouldn't have brought that up at the end. It's one.
that was intentional. That's the
No,
next
yeah, you should
conversation.
have
I ain't
never
even
did that.
responded to it. I ain't
Yeah,
even
yeah, because you'll
responded
be
That's,
to
here.
it.
that's my personal feeling. Like I said, it's not
Oh, man.
transcribed in the report.
Okay,
It's what
because
I'm hearing now, and
we
that's
can
my
build on
personal
that,
feeling.
Ray.
Well, I agree. I feel like it has to be a conversation if
Yeah,
it's
it's
going to
definitely gonna be one
if
because
it's going to
like
be a feasibility. If we actually going to try to legalize marijuana, then we got to have this conversation. We got to figure it out. We
We
gotta
do.
we gotta
But
figure
we
out
got to do
price
long
limits.
term stuff better.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
and and like I said, all of this in our community is contingent upon our ability to educate our people. Because the city, the state, ain't nobody gonna educate our people but us.
but us. But
So
us.
all of the success of all of these initiatives is contingent on our ability to educate our people because we can't let our people fall behind because we see the effects of addiction. We are the community that's being targeted intentionally for these resources and funds. So part of that treatment and rehabilitation type of investment has to be included in education. We got to teach people what's happening. We got to have these brainiacs and academics to talk about these ancillary effects and what's going to happen in 10 years and what's going to happen in 20 years and how do we prepare. But I mean, that's how the white folks do it. They prepare, and
Well,
they
that
got that
that
research.
has been the bbR pop up. I'm telling you, 4722. This is worth every amount of this hour and 30 minutes. I just really appreciate you guys and having this conversation. And Baltimore needs the repair for Baltimore starts in communication and
Right.
actually, calling out what the issues are. Because if we don't define the issues, we can't solve them.
Right.
So your report, definitely the long game, brought them out. Now we're gonna
Right.
see some of the responses now happening. We see some of
they come. They
we
gonna
see so
come.
many nonprofits running around right now. Some doors
Well,
getting knocked on. They got
like I
Madison
said,
out here.
I don't know if that's because of our report, but I'm glad it's happening. I feel like Twan said, if you investigate hope, they only can do what they say they're going to do. And for real, most of the stuff, see, CPP doesn't get paid for any of the community outreach and resources. We get paid to do this research, to be police advocates, public safety work. We don't get paid to have all these events you done been to, or the
Hmm.
food, the man, all that stuff we pay for out of our pockets. You think Hope got a fund for buying the book bags? No, we be buying them, getting them made just because we know this is the need, but this is the conduit we use to have that consistent engagement with our
Where we
people.
gotta
Like you
go.
said,
We
okay.
gotta go. You keep coming. We
Well, you
got
told
to.
me to prepare. Let me tell
Yeah,
you,
I
it was
love
2 months.
this. We are out. We're almost 2 hours in. We gotta go. We gotta get up out of here. But
Till
listen,
the next time, y'all.
yeah, we're going. This gonna be a part two to this one. There's got to be some solutions, and we want to see what is some of the
Where
the
to catch us at? They know where to catch us
assessments.
at, right?
Right.
Catch us
Because
on the
we,
blacktop.
we
They
be
know
on
where to
we
catch
be
us
on
at.
we be on Opportunity Avenue on the 21st, small group
Catch us
conversation
at.
on the 27th.
Okay.
We still doing what we always do.
All right.
Okay. Well, I
Stop.
love that, and we're gonna come. We're gonna come together again. This is
All right.
four
That's what
seven
it is.
two. Um, Black Boxes. This has been an incredible conversation about the long game. Report that is crafted by Ray Kelly and the Citizens Policing Project. I advise you guys check it out. You can go on his website. What's the website, Ray?
cpproject.org, cpproject.org /long game.
Okay, you can pick it up then.
And
And
you can
I'm gonna
get
come through
every,
so I can get mine written on.
sounds good to me. You know where to find me. I'm
Yeah, I gotta
still at
come
the church.
through. So listen, the next event is Opportunity Avenue. You guys,
Opportunity Avenue is the 21st, and we have a small group conversation every last Wednesday. I don't want to call the date. I'm almost positive it's the 27th, but I'm going to say you got to RSVP to go to the small group conversations because we serve food and they in person, and we want to make sure we are cognizant of safety.
okay? So last Wednesday is the 27th. So listen, guys, Twan, thank you for your input. We appreciate you. You always bring it in. Listen, on Monday we come together for the actual community corner. We have a Professor Lawrence Brown.
Well,
That is
That's
the
my
author
that's my
of the Black
dog.
Butterfly.
That's my dog.
Yeah, so y'all got to come through for that. We're gonna raise the roof again.
Hit me up. I'll come through. That's my man.
That's your man. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're gonna raise the roof on Monday for sure.
sounds good.
Yeah. So listen,
talk
we
about it.
out. We boxed up and out. Let's get them deuces, brothers.
Peace.
Bro.
Bro.
Mahala.
Bro,
Holla.
holla. Oh, Baltimore.
That's what we do.
That's